Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Politics and murder. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As you may know, 57-year-old Robert Deere, accused of killing a police officer, two other civilians, after he stormed a Planned Parenthood office in Colorado Springs. Deere is a longtime malcontent who has had problems wherever he has lived. Unfortunately, in a free society, disturbed individuals like Deere run unchecked, and so we have to report murder after murder after murder. Planned Parenthood officials are blaming the killings on harsh criticism directed at the organization after undercover videotapes exposed the sales of aborted baby body parts.
We've experienced so much hateful language, hateful speech. Such a negative environment has been created around the work that Planned Parenthood does, around the idea of safe and legal abortion. And we've seen that across the country from all sorts of speakers in the last few months.
Now, what Ms. Cowart does not say is that Planned Parenthood is in the baby body parts business and deserves much of the harsh criticism directed toward it. Situations reminiscent of the assassination in 2009 of Dr. George Tiller, a late-term abortionist in Kansas. For $5,000, Tiller would terminate any pregnancy for any reason. He was nicknamed Tiller the Baby Killer by organizations who objected to his grisly practice. I reported extensively on Tiller, and after he was assassinated by a man named Scott Roeder, some far-left loons blamed me. The truth is, I reported accurately on Tiller, whose assistant was stripped of her medical license after the assassination. By the way, Roeder was given life in prison, a well-deserved sentence. Now, the big picture is the assassin Roeder and the Colorado killer represent their own sick selves. Nothing more. Same thing with the murder of 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee in Chicago, who was gunned down on the street because his father is allegedly in a gang. 27-year-old Corey Morgan charged with first-degree murder. 22-year-old Kevin Edwards being sought for killing Tyshawn. No matter what the circumstance, it would be wrong to demonize all young black inner-city men for Tyshawn's murder. It is exclusively on the killers and no one else. It is long past time that political zealots stop using heinous crimes to advance their ideology. One more example. Again in Chicago, demonstrators are protesting the police department after a teenager, 17-year-old Laquan McDonald, shot dead by Chicago officer Jason Van Dyke. Videotape shows Laquan holding a knife, but far away from the police officers who were trying to contain him. Laquan was high on PCP and was shot dead during the confrontation. Officer Van Dyke now charged with first-degree murder. Chicago protests were largely peaceful, unlike Baltimore and Ferguson. Also, the Chicago PD is a troubled outfit, there's no question, and deserves to be investigated. For years, they've allowed mass murder to take place in poor neighborhoods. And although it is wrong to convict anyone on television, the videotape on Laquan is very troubling. It is to the credit of the demonstrators in Chicago that they are getting their points across without harming other Americans. But again, you can be sure some zealots will use the Chicago police shooting to demonize all police officers all over the country. That is flat out wrong. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction joining us from Chicago, Dr. Austin Goolsbee, who teaches at the university there. All right, let's take Planned Parenthood first. The guy's a loon, that's it, correct?
You know, I mostly agree with what you said in your talking point there. I think the only thing that I would add is, to the extent you're saying let's tone down the rhetoric, let's tone down the generalization, I 100% agree. We don't know that much about what's going on with this guy. It seems to me like he's probably mentally ill. I mean, he did go in and commit these mass atrocities. But we can say things in the public that get people amped up and lead the mentally ill to go over the edge. It doesn't take any responsibility away from the criminals for us to say, let's tone it down a little bit.
No, I'm not going to tone it down.
When I see Donald Trump saying...
Well, let's stay on. Let's stay on this.
Okay.
I'm not toning it down. All right? Planned Parenthood deceitfully started an industry where they were selling the body parts of aborted fetuses or babies, depending on your point of view. All right? They didn't want the public to know it. They were doing it for money, and they deserve every single thing they got. all exposure,
know.
all the reportage. You just don't do that in a free society. It's barbaric. Now, if they're proud of
Bill,
what they did, doctor,
there's a lot of dispute that that's what the tapes actually showed. So
that's what the case actually showed. That's what it was.
I don't know that it did.
Well, if you're not convinced by words on a videotape, then I can't help you. It was clear that Planned Parenthood didn't want this to be public. It was clear that executives took a cavalier attitude toward it, and it was clear they were doing it for money. All right? So that's clear. There's no doubt about it. So they don't have a beef.
I'm not trying to argue with you about the tapes.
Well, you're telling me to tone it down.
I think
I'm not toning anything down.
I think it's in the spirit of your memo, which is if someone's mentally ill and is going to commit a crime, that's on them. And mostly it is the criminals.
But
let us all
the two guys who shot this 9-year-old down in the street. Are they mentally ill, these two guys?
I hope so. I fear not.
Is it fair to demonize all black men, young men?
No, you shouldn't. I agree with you. That's why I say I agree with that part of your memo.
You can't, but that's by extension. You can't blame the pro-life movement or reporters like me for telling the folks the truth.
And I don't. And I don't, Bill.
That's the point.
What I'm saying is, let's all just take one step back. And not either side, everybody's going to point the finger and blame every crime is due to what somebody else said. Mostly 99% is the criminal themselves, and they should be tried for their crimes.
I'll accept the 99%.
But I just want us to let's not make the situation worse.
Aren't you, a man of the left, then, a bit upset by the charlatans who run out and try to exploit Tyshawn, the 9-year-old, and the Planned Parenthood shootings for their own political purposes? I mean, I just think it's sickening.
I could be, for sure. I'm not trying. I'm trying not to be hypocritical or one-sided in any way. And there are going to be many circumstances where I will be upset. In some of what I've seen coming out of Colorado, they were highlighting how hot the rhetoric was of people on the other side and saying they felt that they were amping up really violent attacks on them. That doesn't excuse the
evidence of violent attacks at Planned Parenthood.
I just want us on all sides to take a step back and try to do less of that.
Now, look, I'm emotionally involved with this because I was accused of tamping that thing up in Kansas. And all I did was accurately report on what that guy Tiller was doing. It was an industry, $5,000, you walk in. It doesn't matter if you're going to give birth tomorrow. It doesn't matter for what reason. He's going to terminate if you pay. I reported it. It was accurate. Kansas took action against the assistant, also a doctor. All right? Now, I'm sorry he's dead. And as I said, the guy who killed him deserves what he got. He probably deserves capital punishment. But I'm not tamping down my reporting because of this kind of demagoguery. I'll give you the last word.
Okay, I would just make a difference between whatever reporting you want to do, but many of the events in some of these things, I still think ought to lead us to take a step back and just cool down our rhetoric. Doesn't have to be our reporting, but just our rhetoric. And let's prosecute the criminals for what they are.
All right, Doc. Always a pleasure to debate with you. Thank you very much. Next on